So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where Ukraine joins NATO. Now currently world tensions are pretty high with Russia looking like it's going to invade Ukraine, and I'm going to be continuing to cover the topic. So now we're going to look at a scenario where Ukraine joins NATO and manages to get into the alliance, and we're going to see how the world responds to that. Pretty important message for you guys right now: the limited time 25,000 subscriber merchandise is going away this Saturday, so February 12th, it will be going away and you will never be able to buy this design ever again. So if you want to pick something up, now is the time to do it. I'm announcing the shout out winner at the end of this month. If you haven't been entered into that already, then the chances of you buying merch and getting entered into it now are pretty low, but you can still probably enter, and to do that, you would just join my Discord server, tell an admin, and send them a picture of the merch, and you'd get entered in. But yeah, once again, that is going away forever, and kind of in celebration of it going away, I'm doing a promo code. So use promo code 25PRO in order to get 15% off on the hoodie or the shirt. So yeah, February 12th is the deadline. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let's go ahead and jump right into this video. Alright, so here we have all of the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization colored in. So blue will represent NATO in this video, and obviously, like I said, Ukraine is going to be joining this alliance. So just like that, the leader countries of NATO decide that Ukraine can join NATO. This is just ignoring the Donbass area, like the country can't be in active conflict, obviously. But in order for this scenario to even happen in the first place, they're going to have to meet the requirements, which means there's no uprest over here. So Ukraine joins NATO. And right away, Russia is angered by this, obviously, because in real life, they said that if Ukraine joins NATO, there's going to be military consequences. And I'm not sure if they would go to war with NATO necessarily, but I'm sure it would lead to another Cold War. We're already seeing Russia ramp up its missile defense systems over here near Japan. They're also moving nuclear capabilities to Kaliningrad and all around the areas of Ukraine. So it's quite obvious that Russia is preparing for something. Either it's going to be like a war with NATO, which is unlikely, or just kind of scaring NATO. Anyway, with Ukraine joining NATO, Russia amps up its forces even more on the Ukrainian border. Right now, there's about 130,000 troops. Let's just go ahead and say that was doubled. And with Ukraine joining NATO, we would also have some countries follow suit with this process. Since Ukraine is a partner country and they received membership, we're going to go ahead and assume the other two partner countries, which are Bosnia and Herzegovina and Georgia, also received membership. So Georgia joins NATO, as well as Bosnia and Herzegovina. So with the rapid buildup of NATO on Russia's borders, they're obviously feeling threatened. With this, we have Russia creating its own military alliance. Right away, we see Belarus join this alliance, as well as Serbia. So Russia targets its main allies at first, which are, like I said, Belarus and Serbia. They also have some other allies, but Russia as itself doesn't have as many as, per se, the USA. So they do manage to get some other countries in, such as Armenia, as well as Iran. So this new, I guess, common turn you can call it, is building up, and NATO and Russia are having some serious tension build up. Now remember, this all started because of Ukraine. Next up, we see Iraq join this pack, and at this point, we have tensions at an all-time high since the Cold War. Both alliances are struggling to gain members at this point, but some countries do start to open up to the possibility, and the terms of joining each alliance is loosened so they can get more members. We see Israel joining on NATO's side, as well as Kosovo. Azerbaijan joins with NATO, and on the red team, we see Syria join in, as well as Lebanon. So at this point, it is expanding outside of Europe and is starting to flood into Asia, and overall this is looking like it's going to turn into a world war, which is what it's probably going to end up being. But yeah, once again, this is all because Ukraine joined NATO. With that, tensions escalated, so finally we see some war activities happening. Russia fakes a video saying that Russia was attacked by Ukrainian soldiers, which is what they were going to do in real life, if you didn't know. So with that, we have Russia declaring war on Ukraine, and they start their invasion into the country. Using all 260,000 of the troops on the border, they managed to make pretty well progress into Ukraine. The 60,000 troops in Belarus pushed down, while the other 200,000 flood in on all sides. They take the Donbass region and start to push towards Kiev. Now at this point, NATO has been activated and troops are already on the move. There's already some troops stationed in Ukraine, so we have like American soldiers, Italian, French, German. All those soldiers are probably stationed in Ukraine due to tensions. But nonetheless, Russia has the advantage here as they take Kiev and push further into the country. Now, like I said earlier, this activated NATO, so we do see some troops moving around, but they're mostly on defensive as Russia has been preparing for this invasion for a long time. They have troops along all of the Baltics, Poland, and Georgia and Azerbaijan, and they're ready for this. As well as their allies, they were also ready for this invasion, so we see Iran push up into Azerbaijan and out into southern Turkey. Russia pushes into contested areas of Georgia and manages to collapse the country. With this, Azerbaijan is cut off and is eventually forced into surrender, and overall the red team is seen pushing into eastern Turkey. Now obviously the blue team was not prepared for this, and this is obviously a world war, and a lot of people are calling it the war that the West was not prepared for. Luckily for the West though, Serbia is in the middle of Europe, and they do manage to push in and capture the country pretty easily. Oh, in the Baltics, Belarusian and Russian troops start to push into the three countries, and eventually they connect to Kaliningrad. Down in Turkey, we see the red team continuing to make their progress into the country, but they are being slowed down as Turkish troops start to head over towards towards the front line. Down south, we see Israel push into Lebanon and southern Syria, while up north, Russia seems to be completing its invasion of Ukraine. After capturing a majority of the country, we see Russia offering peace to the west. Now with this treaty, they opt to annex all of Ukraine and Georgia, as well as get a little bit of Lithuania and Poland in order to connect Kaliningrad to Belarus. Obviously, NATO declines this, and the war continues on. Now, if I haven't mentioned already, it's extremely unlikely that Ukraine would be able to join NATO, and it's also extremely unlikely that it would escalate into a full-on world war. If Ukraine did end up joining NATO, I'm sure that there would be, well, I'm not sure, but I think there might be some form of diplomacy preventing a war from happening, but I can't be too sure on that because, you know, it's Russia. We never know with Russia. Anyway, since the fighting is continuing on, we see Russian troops push down into southern Ukraine and into Romania. We also see Russian troops pushing into northern Romania, and we also see Lithuania capitulate. Now, at this point, each side probably needs some more allies. NATO probably needs allies in order to push back the red team, and the red team is going to need some allies in order to keep pushing into the blue team. So NATO is the first one up, as we see Saudi Arabia join in on NATO's side, but on the contrary, we see Venezuela and Cuba join in on Russia's side. Now, in order to justify this, because obviously Venezuela and Cuba wouldn't join without justification, Russia has said that they might be moving troops over into those two countries. So with Russian troops over there, we would probably assume that the country's governments would join in on the war. So with this, we have the USA, who's going to be a little bit distracted. So the number one superpower of the world obviously can manage two fronts at once. So they're going to be sending some troops down to the Caribbean, and obviously most of the troops over to Europe. But this is also going to serve as a major distraction. Not being able to use all of your military force is pretty not good in a war. So while the USA may be distracted in the Caribbean, they are also going to have some help here. They're going to have some help from their ally of Colombia. And over in the Pacific, we see Japan join. So this world war has officially turned into a world war with almost one country in every continent participating. In fact, just to make it official, we have Oceania joining in. So New Zealand and Australia join in on the side of NATO. And we see Morocco join in on the side of NATO. On the contrary to this, though, we see Algeria join in on the side of Russia, and this prompts a war between these two countries. Luckily for Morocco, though, we do see Portugal and Spain start to send some units down into Morocco in order to fight off Algeria. And of course, we also see France fighting back Algeria because, it's France. So once again, another big distraction for both sides. It's not looking too good for the red side anymore. Having Venezuela and Cuba join in on the red team would be very beneficial for them. But unfortunately, we have Colombia joining in, which will take care of Venezuela. And then, of course, we have Japan joining in, which will take care, just serve as a military base for U.S. troops. So yeah, this chain reaction really didn't work out too well for Russia. Anyway, back over in the Balkans, we see Russian troops completely push into Romania. They managed to capture the capital. And with this, we see Russian troops push over towards Serbia. Up north, we see both Estonia and Latvia fall. And Russian troops start to push into Poland. Down south, we see Saudi troops pushing up into Iraq. And Moroccan and European troops pushing into northern Algeria. Over in Venezuela, we see Colombian and American troops pushing into the country. And we see an American landing in western Cuba. From here, they managed to easily push into the country as lots of protests and riots rise up. Eventually, the people in Cuba overthrow their government, leading to Cuba surrendering. Over in Japan, we see Japan doing a little bit of island hopping. They managed to retake their archipelago of islands, and once again starting a push back into their old claims. So now over in Europe, we're seeing some countries start to question what's happening in Europe. Specifically here, we have Sweden and Finland, who have already given their stance on the Ukrainian-Russian scenario. Basically, they both said that they're not going to join NATO, but they're not going to throw out the opportunity of joining NATO, which just means that they're not going to join NATO, but they might. So with this conflict escalating, we see Sweden and Finland both announce that this isn't really aligning with their security concerns, and we see both countries join in on NATO. Now, backing this, of course, in real life, they've both said that if something plays out and it doesn't really match with what they want to be happening in Europe, then they will be forced to join NATO or whatever they want to do. So with this, we see a large influx of Nordic troops over here in Northern Europe being sent over here towards northern Russia. These troops then start to invade and push towards St. Petersburg. Back down south, we see Israel push up and then capture all of Lebanon and start to push into Syria. We also see Turkey troops start to push back Iran, and eventually forces meet up with Israel. Over in Algeria, we see the Moroccans and Europeans push across the northern Algerian plains, eventually taking over the capital and forcing the country to surrender. Over in Venezuela, we see many American landings starting to be made, which in turn starts a rebellion, because if you didn't know, in Venezuela, there's two very different sides fighting for power right now, and we have that other side popping up and helping out the Americans, which eventually leads to the collapse of Venezuela. And with this, we have the USA, who is no longer fully distracted, starting to move their troops over to Europe, but this doesn't necessarily inhibit Russian progress, as we do see them continuing to push into the Balkans. Specifically, we have all of southern Romania being captured, as well as northern Bulgaria. Over in Poland, the front line is expanded a little bit more until eventually it comes to a halt, and eventually Russian forces are frozen as they start to be pushed back. First place that they're being pushed back is over in Poland, as NATO, like I said, pushes back. From here, they start a slight invasion of Belarus, but mainly focus on taking back Ukraine and Romania. After seeing the possibilities of an encirclement, we have Russian troops being forced to retreat out of Romania and Bulgaria, which leads to two countries to being liberated by NATO. The Russian troops then back up to Ukraine and start to focus on holding a defensive line between the border of Moldova and the Black Sea. Meanwhile, up north, we see all of northern Russia being captured, as well as St. Petersburg starting to be threatened. Down in the Middle East, we see the blue team completely push back Iraq and Syria, and eventually almost all of Turkey is liberated. So once again, taking a look at this world map, we see a lot more blue than we do red now. Earlier on, it was looking like the red team might be able to prevail and eventually make a stalemate, but now it looks like they're going to be pushed back and I guess completely annihilated. So over in Japan, we have the capturing of this main Russian island, and I swear to God, I can never remember the name of it. Trust me, I at one point knew the name of it, but since then I just kind of forgot. But over here in southern Russia, we see a American and Japanese landing, which eventually leads to the capturing of a lot of southern Russia over here in the east. Back over in Europe, we see lots of Ukraine being fully liberated. Eventually, these Russian troops here are forced to retreat once again, as NATO looks like it might be able to pull off an encirclement. Over in Belarus, it isn't looking too good as NATO storms in and manages to take the capital of the country. And with the full capitulation of Belarus, we have the liberation of the Baltics. Leningrad is slowly but surely taken, and it is finally time for NATO to start their full-scale invasion of Russia. The first major city we see fall is St. Petersburg, as it falls to NATO forces. Down south, we see the red team being completely kicked out of Turkey. We see Georgia being liberated, as well as Armenia being captured. With this, the Middle East starts to focus on pushing back Iran as they cross the border into the country. We see Azerbaijan being liberated, and once again, the push into Iran has started. Finally, over in Ukraine, we see NATO forces push over and capture Kiev, which leads to the reinstallment of the Ukrainian government. With this, almost all of Ukraine is completely liberated, other than the Donbass region, and we also see the capturing of Crimea. Down south in Caucasus, we do see a little bit of progress made in southern Russia, although it is very slow since this is a pretty mountainous region. While over in Iran, we see lots of protests pop up, and eventually, with the help of the people, we see the capturing of Iran's capital. From here, some more fighting does take place, but eventually we see Iran capitulate, and with this, Russia starts to lose all hope. We see Japan and America push further into southeastern Russia, and at this point, Russia is pretty desperate for some help. Now, obviously, I've chosen not to include China in on this video because I don't want to necessarily copy other World War III videos I've done, which there's a lot of them apparently. But in almost all those videos, we've had China join in, and that just kind of throws out the entire, I guess, scenario as a whole. Now, in real life, China and Russia have kind of said they might help each other in a war against Ukraine, but that doesn't, I don't know. You don't really know with China. You also really don't know with Russia. Anyway, back over in the West, we have some major developments as the last Russian troops are kicked out of Ukraine. With this, NATO starts a full-scale invasion, as I said already, into Russia. And with this, Russia has one major front line to worry about. NATO troops push across and manage to connect up with Kazakhstan, which leads to the starvation and eventually fall of the southern Russia. From here, troops start to push towards Moscow. Over in the east, we have troops pushing up and managing to cut off a major part of Siberia from the rest of Russia, which leads this area to fall under control of NATO. Overall, this front line doesn't move, and it really isn't even defended very well, so this area is just kind of there. And the main focus is obviously over here in Europe, as we see NATO troops push into Moscow. With this, we get the city being captured, and Russia starting to fall back. Now, in real life, I don't think Russia would necessarily surrender. They might make like a last effort in order to blow up NATO, using nuclear bombs. We're all hoping that doesn't happen. We're all also hoping that a war doesn't even happen in the first place. But realistically, that might happen. In this scenario, it won't be happening. And with that, we see Russia surrender. So just like that, the blue team has whipped back Russia and its allies. And yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the peace treaty. So taking a look at this peace treaty here, it's going to be a little bit different from my main videos, but it's going to have the overall same feeling to it. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this country by country. So over in the Americas, we have Colombia getting a little bit of land off of Venezuela, but overall we have a new government being set up. Now over in Cuba, we have a pretty interesting scenario here where it's kind of being controlled by the USA, but it has a lot of autonomy, and also there's a new government being set up. Heading on over to Europe, we have our usual changes here, but we do see Ukraine becoming very big. Starting off in Serbia, though, we have a new government being set up. Finland annexes a big part of northern Russia. Lithuania gets a little bit of land out of Belarus, as well as Poland getting Kaliningrad and also a little bit of land out of Belarus. Ukraine is expanded up into Belarus and Russia. Georgia gets more Caucasus land, and Azerbaijan becomes a very big country, annexing all of Armenia, some parts of Iran, and parts of Russia. Turkey gets a lot of land from Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Israel gets Lebanon as well as a part of Syria. Saudi Arabia gets southern Iraq as well as some land from Iran. And Iran is given a new government. Finally, over here in Asia, we have a reverse Alaska being set up. So this is controlled by the USA, and it could be made into a state, or it could be released back into Russia. And then, of course, we have Japan getting back their old claims. And as for Russia itself, it is united with the rest of Belarus, and a new government system is set up. It's a bit of a stretch, but that's what would happen if Ukraine joined NATO. Obviously, it probably would not escalate to this, but it is possible. It's not like impossible. It's definitely possible, but just extremely unlikely. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. That really helps me out. Once again, merchandise is going away on February 12th. This is your last time to get it. If you want a 15% discount, use promo code 25PRO. Once again, that's never ever being sold ever again. So if you haven't picked it up already, I highly recommend you do. Oh, one more thing. I completely forgot to mention this, but thank you guys a lot for 30,000 subscribers. We hit that on February 1st, and I've yet to even mention it. I kind of feel bad for that, but I'm really thankful for that, guys. That's awesome. Where we've, 3 times as 10K. Like, I never thought I would hit 10K, but I've times by 3, that's crazy. We're 30% of the way there to getting the silver play button, and that would be like a dream come true to me. So if you guys want to help out, subscribe to the channel. That would be amazing. I'm still thinking about that. I'd probably replace that picture back there with it so you can see it in the videos. I mean, if I'm even in this same house when I hit 100K. But yeah, I replaced that ugly whiteboard with that picture. It's really nice. It's displayed. Display is really cool. I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but once again, thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.